the internet's leading site for all things 2016 NFL draft prospects, all the videos, highlights, and of course, some of the best analysis on the web. My friend and co-host Justin Higdon is one of the lead scouts for the team or for Draft Breakdown, and he's with me tonight. Justin, how are you?
I'm good. Update you guys on the baby situation. We're still in the holding pattern. I'm still on call at any time, but I think I've got at least a solid week or so to go. So we'll try and get a couple this show and maybe one more in before I have to take a little break.
And usually we have Justis with us, but he's busy coaching tonight. And we have a guest we're trying to get in right now, Emory Hunt, footballgameplan.com. And he's having some technical difficulties. So as soon as he's able to join us, he will. But for now, Justin and I will get started. And if Emory doesn't get in, it'll be a little bit shorter of a podcast than normal. Obviously, if he does, it'll be our normal 45 to an hour. So let's just get started with some of what we saw from last weekend. I thought that Paxton Lynch, we talked about him Thursday night with Jeff Risdon, and now it seems like there's a lot of consensus. Maybe that's a bad word to use. But it seems like people are coming around to the idea that he's the best quarterback in this draft. Is Brock Osweiler 2.0 really, QB1 in a draft?
Not in my opinion. I think anybody who's read my stuff, people who've listened to this show, I think know that I think Connor Cook is the top quarterback. And does that mean I think he's the number one overall pick? No, it doesn't. It means I think he's for sure the top senior quarterback. Right now, I think he's the best quarterback, and I think there's a good bit of distance. Now with Lynch, I watched him last Friday night. He played really well. His video was up immediately the next morning on Draft Breakdown, so props to the video staff. But he did. He looked really good. One thing I can't help but notice with him is he's a tall guy, 6'7". Like you said, we talked to Jeff Risdon about this last week, and he says he's a legit 6'7". So, 6'6", 6'7". These guys have really long arms, and it really lengthens the delivery. So you've got this kind of loopy delivery, and anytime you've got that kind of long, loopy delivery, even though he's getting the ball out accurately and with pretty good trajectory for a tall guy, especially down the field, he's going to be a little bit slower than a guy who's more in the ideal quarterback height range of 6'2" to 6'4". So that's something I just couldn't help but notice. That being said, I was very impressed, and now I've seen him twice, so I'm pretty impressed with both times. I didn't get to see him beat Ole Miss, but I'm very cognizant of the fact that he beat Ole Miss, which is considered one of the better defensive teams in the SEC, at least it was at the time. So I think, Lynch is on his way to get into that first round conversation. But what really, when you alluded to it with the consensus, Roto World Draft tweets out a blurb today that says, I forget what the source was, but they had talked to 5 scouts, and they said that they all said that Lynch was the top quarterback in the draft. And I'm wondering what those scouts would have said 2 to 4 weeks ago. And at that time, we were hearing that Jared Goff was the top quarterback in the draft. And then I wonder, why are we talking so much about Goff, about Paxton Lynch, when we don't really know? I know why we're talking about these guys, because they're hot topics. But why would scouts be talking about juniors who have not yet been able to declare and who still have the option of not declaring unless they've got really hard and fast info that these guys are going to declare? I have my doubts about that, and I want to say that's a bit of sourcing in quotes.
So when it comes to what's going to happen here, you know what is Lynch and like you said, Goff. Should we pump the brakes overall on them until we actually find out what's going to happen? Because as you said, like it's good to have an idea about these guys, but they're juniors. Lynch is a junior, right? Or is he a senior?
He's a junior.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Yeah, they're
So
both juniors.
so yeah, you got two juniors, and we're kind of force feeding them as um we're force feeding them as the quarterbacks of this draft class. How is that fair? And is it fair to like Connor Cook? Because outside of Cook, who's your next senior quarterback you're even going to talk about outside of Cook?
Yeah, that's a good question. Outside of Cook, um, we've talked about it. We talked about it last week with Jeff. How I was coming around on Trevon Boykin. Jeff mentioned Dak Prescott. Jacoby Brissett's another guy we've talked about on the show before, and I don't think that I don't know that at any time anyone that we've talked to on the show or off the air has said that those guys were first round picks in any type of definitive sense, and I certainly don't think so. So because of the, I guess just the lack of names at the top, then we could talk about Brandon Doughty, who I've mentioned as kind of more like a late round or free agent type of player who I like. Outside of Cook, there's just not a lot there. And people, I think, have already decided in a lot of respects that they didn't like Cook, or they had decided this after last year, and are searching for that next big thing. Now, that's not to say people don't legitimately like Goff or Paxton Lynch, because I think people legitimately do. But I think what we're seeing is people don't want to commit to a Connor Cook, and so they're looking for that next big thing. And what bothers me about the whole thing is that you've got 3 weeks ago, Goff is in everybody's mouth as the top quarterback, and now it's Paxton Lynch 2 weeks later. And we're joined now by Emory Hunt, the czar of the playbook, the godfather of football, Gameplan.com, and just in time to weigh in on this, because I know Emory and I have talked about this at length. So, Emory, what are your feelings now about Paxton Lynch kind of being thrust into the forefront as maybe the top quarterback, as we saw in that Roto World report this morning? And are we pushing these juniors, Lynch and Goff, up into the forefront just because we don't have enough seniors to talk about?
Yeah, I think it's amazing that you get guys that it seems like every other week it's another player that's thrust into the spotlight or thrust into the top 10. It's almost like the NFL and these quote-unquote scouts are desperate for these quarterback prospects to come out, and we need to prop a guy up. But Paxton Lynch, I don't know. Just watching him in passing, his style is similar to Carson Palmer as far as how he throws the football, how he has a good deep ball, how at times he may be a little bit off with his placement. He's an athlete just like Carson Palmer. I know what he runs in a 40, but I know Carson Palmer ran a 4.56 in a 40-yard dash. But to me, he reminds me a lot of Carson Palmer in how he plays. Goff is a guy that I say reminds me a lot of Derek Carr, David Carr's brother, in how he plays, when the pocket is clean and how he plays versus pressure. But I just feel as though these guys, can be better served with another year in college. And I hate the fact that they're pumping these guys up to where now if you're Goff or you're Lynch, you're going to read the press clippings and say, hey, they think I'm pretty good. And I always think back to John Walsh, I think his name was John Walsh, but I know his last name was Walsh, that played at BYU. I think I was maybe like 15 or 16. When he was reading the press clippings from Mel Kiper, he came out early as a junior from BYU, went undrafted, and wanted to sue Mel Kiper because he went undrafted because Kiper hyped him up. But I hate for that to happen to these guys. At the end of the day, as a player, you know your own skill set. You know you're not that good. So you should go back and play them the year and hone out your skills.
And guys, didn't we see this to some degree like 2 years ago with Brett Smith?
Exactly. You know, I don't know where he was getting that information, but you know your skill set. You know you didn't put together, you know, first round, second round, third round worthy of game film out there. And in Brett Smith's case, you have a guy coming in Craig Boyle who runs a great pro style offense that he would have been better suited to play in to show those NFL scouts that, hey, I can turn my back to the defense. I can reset my eyes. I can make adjustments at the line of scrimmage. The same things you're seeing Carson Wentz do now at North Dakota State, Smith would have been able to do at Wyoming if he stayed another year.
Seth, you're on mute, buddy.
When it comes to quarterbacks, and we saw the I don't know what you want to call it, but the piece by Greg Gabriel the other day on Jared Goff, maybe the hit piece on Draft Twitter, we can call it. But we saw what he wrote about young quarterbacks and you guys both hit on it, and how they all probably need to go back for another season. Obviously, Jameis and Marcus were underclassmen. What is your take on young quarterbacks in general, especially guys that are coming from, these air raid spread offenses where, as much as we'd like to think that the NFL is going to adapt, we know that they have not, and they probably will not adapt their style to fit what these players that they're drafting can do.
I think when you look at these guys, and I was just on a podcast, I want to say maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago with Ted Sundquist, and he asked a question about these smaller school guys and how come I tend to see those guys in a higher light. Well, looking at it from a quarterback perspective, number one, you're getting guys that are in school 4 to 5 years. So, and these smaller school coaches are there for about a decade at least. So they have that luxury of longevity. So they're going to implement their scheme. These guys are going to get coached up on the fundamentals. They're going to be coached up on the different, the little nuances of playing a position, whatever position they may play. So for a quarterback, when you see, let's say, a Jeff Matthews, or you may see a guy like, let's say, a David Fales or someone like that, someone coming from a lower FBS to an FCS school or Division II school, they're going to be more technically sound. They're going to be more fundamentally sound. So when you look at a guy coming from the FBS level, they may churn out offensive coordinators each and every year. They may go through different head coaches throughout the course of their 4-year career, and they may only stay 3. So they are not as ready to play right away as these guys like a Jimmy Garoppolo may have been coming out as a rookie, even though he came from a smaller school. So I would say they have to stay. There's no downside to playing more football, especially at the collegiate level, because the more you play, the more you see. So when you look at a guy like Marcus Mariota or let's say a Jameis Winston, they may not have seen a lot defensively that these other guys have seen that are 4- or 5th-year seniors coming out. And it's all about being able to see a lot of different blitzes, a lot of different coverages, a lot of different defenses, and that's how you put yourself in better position to be able to handle what you'll see at the NFL level.
And I think that's what Gabriel was getting at in his piece, where he talked about Cook, and he was where he talked about Goff, and he was pretty adamant about the fact that he wants a quarterback who's been in school for 4 years, not necessarily played for 4 years. So he left the door open for like a redshirt junior situation, but he wanted a guy that's been in school for 4 years. So with that being said, Emory, I know you and I have talked about Connor Cook a lot. Do you think that puts Cook in the driver's seat? And what is your overall take on him? Is he the top quarterback or the top senior quarterback in this class?
Well, it's still tough for me to say who's the top senior quarterback, because I think there's a lot of guys out there that have played well, and I haven't really dove into guys' game. You know, I still see a lot of small school guys that I think would be a little bit better than Cook. But in Cook's case, you know, and I know we're probably of age to where we can remember a guy like Trent Dilfer coming out of Fresno State, and how he was. You know, I think he was a junior when he came out, but we can remember how polished he was, so to speak, or what he was able to put together on film at Fresno State in that offense. And I think when you see Cook, you see a guy that can be a pro. You know, he has a lot of throws. He has a lot of A-plus skills. But where I have an issue with Cook is in situational football, third down defense. Third down offense, red zone, 4-minute offense, those situations. But as far as like the traits, as far as like throws, he can hit all the throws you want to see. He can make adjustments at the line as far as protections are concerned. So I would say he definitely has pro game. Now, would you take a chance on him in the first? I wouldn't, because to me that first round quarterback has to be a guy that can come in and play right away. But can you trust him in a 3 to 4 game stretch? Absolutely. The same way you could trust Kirk Cousins, the same way you could trust, a Josh McCown, the same way you can trust maybe, let's say, a Josh Johnson or so, someone that you can rely on, or Thad Lewis, in a 2 to 3 game stretch to help you keep going until your starter gets back in the fold. So I see Cook as a guy that can play at the pro level. He has a lot of experience. He has a lot of traits that you would like to see, but you want to see a guy at this juncture of his college career be a lot better in the situational part of the game.
One of the things I wanted to ask you, and you hit on it a little bit, you're not only passion about scouting, but your passion of kind of trying to get these smaller school guys noticed and bringing them to light for a lot of people. How did that get started, and where do you hope, obviously you had your first broadcast opportunity 2 weeks ago to be a part of a in-game broadcast. Where do you hope it eventually takes you?
Well, ultimately, we want Football Game Plan to be its own network. And, this 2 weeks ago was my 5th or 4th opportunity to do a play-by-play, first college opportunity. And I would guess the small college, aspect of it kind of started when I was in college, man. We used to sit around, and by us being everybody's homecoming, in the first part of the season, we were playing Texas Tech, Oklahoma State, Central Florida at the time. And so we're seeing, in preparation for those games, we're watching, tape of other games. So let's say when we were preparing for Texas Tech, we were watching Texas and watching Ricky Williams and watching, those guys out there. I forgot the 2 defensive tackles, Sean Rogers and Casey Hampton, Hampton. And we're seeing other players at our position that were highly touted coming out of high school. A lot of these guys we knew from reading the press clippings or reading Prep Star or something like that. It wasn't a lot of these websites, but it was just maybe like 1 or 2 magazines that you just happen to stumble upon, and you see a guy's name. Who were like, yo, he's about to go number 1 in the draft or in the first round. He's terrible. It was like, wow. So and we're watching. And I remember my sophomore year, we lost at home to Sam Houston State, right? Receiver at the time was Matt Dominguez, who went on to a long career in the CFL for the Saskatchewan Roughriders. The quarterback that day was Josh McCown. He tore our butt up. He was a dual threat guy. Like we couldn't get off the field on third downs because Josh McCown was running for first downs. And when he was in the pocket, he was just throwing it up to Matt Dominguez. So, and when we saw him at Arizona, we weren't shocked that he could play well like this because we saw him do it to us. So that's where it got started. It's like, man, there's a lot of guys out here on our team, guys that we've played against that can play. The problem is, people at the time it was Southwest Louisiana, then we transitioned to Louisiana Lafayette, but people look at the name and assume that, okay, I don't recognize your name, so your talent must be the same. But our secondary had Kyrese Abear, who's still playing all-pro ball in the CFL right now. Fred Stamps, who's playing receiver right now for the Montreal Alouettes. Charles Tillman, who's playing for the Carolina Panthers. Ike Taylor, that's playing for that just retired. So we had talent. But so for me, it was like, I played with a lot of guys that didn't get that recognition because of the stigma of playing at a lower school. When we played against bigger school guys like Chris Sims, who was the sole reason why we were up 10-0 in the second quarter against Texas.
But Chris Sims got drafted and got chances in the NFL because he is Phil's kid, and he went to Texas.
Exactly, and that's the part that people don't. And in that game, we were up 10-0. Started the second quarter. Chris Sims threw a pick six. Started the second quarter. We up 10-0. We punt the ball. We down it at the 1. And so now they're down 10-0. They got 99 yards to go, and entire 80,000 people in the stands quiet. So it started the second quarter. They take out Chris Sims, put in Major Applewhite. First pass, 50-yard bomb to Roy Williams. So now at the 50. Second play, 49-yard touchdown to Sloan Thomas, or I forgot the receiver name. It was the other receiver, and we lost 52-10. So so Chris Sims didn't play the rest of the day, but it's those things, and so we played against Asante Samuel, and it was just like when I started doing this, it was like there's a bunch of good football players no matter where they go. Even guys I played with in the high school, going back to high school, guys that had D1, AA at the time, or D2 opportunities, but chose the educational route and went D3. A couple of guys that played at Millsaps, which is in Jackson, Mississippi, Division III program, good Division III school, and these are guys that can play. So for me, when I started football game plan, it was like, I'm gonna cast that net wide and bring light to these guys that are out there. And there's a lot of talented players, and a lot of times it's all about circumstance. Some guys may have just chosen the Division III route, and I remember in high school, and probably rethinking this now, I probably shouldn't have done this. But I remember Columbia came to the school, and I had good enough grades where I can get into Columbia. But at the time, I was getting recruited by Iowa. I was getting recruited by Tulane. I was getting recruited by Southwestern Louisiana, or Louisiana Lafayette now. And Columbia sitting there, and it was like, well, we don't offer athletic scholarships. I was like, well, there's nothing for me to talk about with you, so it's like, our discussion is over, so, but I didn't know they gave grants. That's why Harvard's so much of a powerhouse right now. I want to say maybe 70% of their players are on aid, even though they don't give athletic scholarships, but that's why they're such a powerhouse, and they pump out pro prospects every year. But I turned down Columbia, but it was, it's just interesting that there's a lot of guys across the nation, no matter what school you go to, that there's pro-level talent. Now, every guy isn't a prospect, but there's a bunch of good prospects out there, from FBS all the way down to NAIA.
And we'll end the small school talk on this, but we kind of joke around on Twitter a lot, you and I, and John Brown, too small, went to small college. You kind of joked about that the other day, as he's putting up. I mean, if Larry Fitzgerald wasn't, hadn't found the fountain of youth, or wasn't one of the greatest receivers of all time, he'd probably be wide receiver 1 in Arizona. And that's a guy that went to Pitt State because of circumstances, like you talked about. Circumstances led him to Pitt State, not because he wasn't good enough to go anywhere else. And I think you kind of really hit it there. There are circumstances, and a lot of these guys aren't going to get the chance to prove themselves. But I think with I'm friends with Kevin Guy of the Arizona Rattlers, and obviously the CFL. I think with all the football avenues that there are now, guys are at least getting a chance to continue their career and pursuing their dream, which is probably the most important thing to most of them.
Well, it's funny you mentioned Kevin Guy, because Kevin Guy is in our 2 latest books, Football Love Story and What Did Football Teach Me? So I talked to Kevin Guy, interviewed him for the book, and he's a great interview, by the way, a passionate guy. And what was funny, and he hits the nail right on the head, because when we were all, coming up in school or what have you, I don't know where you guys grew up, but I grew up in New Orleans. So the only teams we saw on TV were Florida State, Florida, Miami, and sometimes LSU, because they weren't even good back then. So now, you get kids, everybody's on TV, So, and I remember talking to North Alabama's coach, Bobby Wallace, right? A legendary coach down there. He's retired, retired, and came back to the same program. And we were talking, and he was like, and I told him, like, yeah, coach, I played at, what is Southwest Louisiana. He was like, yeah, we beat you guys in 97. I was like, yeah, I know. I remember when it was time for me to make a decision, I was like, yo, these dudes lost to a Division II school? Like, this is terrible. Like, what the hell am I getting into? And the funny part is, I knew about North Alabama because during the Division II playoffs, all you saw was North Alabama. All you saw was Pittsburgh State. In the 1AA playoffs, all you saw was Youngstown State, Marshall, and McNeese State. So, you only knew about, maybe regionally, probably about a good 13 or 14 schools in the nation. Now everybody knows about everywhere. So that's why you see a John Brown going to Pittsburgh State and not having a problem with it. That's why you see more of these quote-unquote signing day parties of guys signing with Division II schools or NAIA schools, because you know what? As long as they got ESPN3, they're going to be seen. And that's the biggest thing. Our biggest thing growing up in high school was being seen. And it was almost like a letdown that, oh man, I'm not going to be on, Raycom or Jefferson Pilot or something like that. I got to go to, USL or Louisiana Lafayette now, to where I would never be seen, so be it, but nowadays it doesn't surprise me that a guy like John Brown is having success or got seen, because he's noticed more now because of the internet and because of a lot of different avenues people can watch games.
I love that you dropped the Raycom in there, because the people who cut videos for us probably are like 10 years too young to know anything about Raycom, but I definitely remember that.
When we look at the 2016 draft class, there's a lot of statements that are being made about players, about positions, about talent or lack of. Justin, we'll start with you. What's one big misconception that you're seeing being spread about the 2016 NFL draft class or a player within that class?
Well, I want to talk about this one because Emory and I have talked about it before. But the criticism of Derrick Henry, the running back from Alabama. Henry, 6'3", 240-pound guy, and he's having a terrific junior season, and right now already kind of at career high levels for what he's done as a collegian. We've seen Bama split carries between backs in the past, and Henry's really the only back that's getting carries for them, that really taking on the heavy workload. So every time I say something nice about Derrick Henry, or Derrick Henry's having a good game, the criticisms come out. He's not shifty enough. He goes down on first contact. And that Kenyon Drake, his Bama teammate, is the better Alabama back. So first of all, I don't need a 240-pound back to necessarily be shifty. Those other two statements, going down on first contact and Drake being the better back, I just simply don't agree with them. And I think Henry is a very good player. And I wanted to let Emory kind of take it from here and give us his 2 cents on that situation, those type of comments.
Well, when you look at, and I agree with you, Henry is the far better back than Drake. I hate dropping, old school guys, or guys that the majority may not have known about or remembered. But remember the run, Chris Warren, tall guy. It's about 6'3", about 230, about the same size as Henry. And with these bigger backs, at some point he's gonna break one. and he's gonna wear down a defense because with a smaller guy, let's say, and I don't want to go to the extreme like a Dre Archer, but let's say a smaller guy like a Justin Forsett. Defenders love to tackle him because he's gonna kind of like protect himself. But as far as a back like a Derrick Henry or Le'Veon Bell, those backs are the same size as linebackers. So they tend to like, okay, I'm going to deliver a blow from time to time because my body can sustain that type of punishment, so to speak. So Henry he can get tackled by the first guy on the first couple of carries. But let's say by that 14th or 15th carry, they're tired of tackling the guy that's built just like them. So they won't come as aggressive, and that's when he, boom, pops that 45-yard run. And we've seen him have the acceleration and the speed to break a 40 to 50-yard run. And I think he's a very underrated receiver in the passing game, too. So he tells me that he's a 3-down back. So I think a lot of times nowadays people get caught up in the highlights. So they may see that's why a lot of people tend to look at a guy, let's say like a Kevin White, a receiver, and bypass everything Amari Cooper did because it wasn't as flashy as Kevin White. Even though Kevin White is a really good player, Amari Cooper was the better prospect because he did it over a course of 3 to 4 years or 3 years at a consistent level. But he didn't have the splashy plays, so people started to nitpick his game. And I think a lot of people are doing that with Derrick Henry. It may not look flashy, but when you look at an NFL game right now, look at LeGarrette Blount. He doesn't look flashy, but at the end of the day, you see 21 carries, 130 yards, 2 touchdowns, maybe 40 yards receiving. What more do you want?
Right, and I'll plead guilty to preferring Kevin White last year to Cooper, but I wanted to also I wanted to get that out of the way. But I also wanted to tell you that I was told on Saturday night while Derrick Henry was having yet another big game. You mentioned his receiving skills, which I agree with, and of course he's a very good pass blocker. But I was told Saturday night that he had stone hands. So it really just, I think the highlights thing, the thing that guys only see in bits and pieces and then making a sweeping statement like that, I don't know. I very politely asked the person who told me that what games he's seen, because all the notes I have are saying he's got soft hands as a receiver. Yeah, of course he's going to have a drop or two. Everybody does.
But you got to remember, too, last year, we had TJ Yeldon can't run, right? Like, he wasn't a good prospect. And I think Mark Ingram's slow NFL career start, and then obviously Trent Richardson not being good, has really cast a shadow on, Alabama running backs just aren't very good. But then the funny thing is, you both said it, people are propping up Kenyon Drake. Drake's averaging 4.2 or 4.3 yards per carry.
Henry's averaging 4 carries a game, right?
Yeah, and Henry's averaging 6 yards a carry. And there was one game, I can't remember how long ago it was, where Drake had 8 carries for 0 yards. It's you can't say, well, this guy's better, but he's just not getting the opportunity. And then he gets 8 carries. Yeah, that's not very many, but he gets 8 carries and does absolutely nothing with it. I don't know. I think Alabama backs, that's one of the big misconceptions in the draft community right now, is that they're made by their offensive line. But let's be honest, a lot of their offensive linemen that have been drafted haven't been very good. So, DJ Fluker's good, but he's always hurt. Chance Warmack was pretty good. I think he's finally coming around. I'm trying to think of anybody else that's that's a great offensive lineman that came from Bama in the recent years, and I can't right now. So I don't know.
Emory, to build off that point real quick.
Oh, go ahead.
Nick Saban's a guy who is, like I said, split carries with 2 backs. When it was Lacey and Trent Richardson, it was Trent Richardson and Mark Ingram. And there's a reason he's not doing that with Henry and Drake, in my opinion.
And at the end of the day, and this is one of the myths we brought up in our Stiff Arming Football Myths book, that you can't look at every player is different. So just because they went to one school doesn't mean they're the same player. Because if that was the case, why are people not drafting backs in droves from Oklahoma State. I mean, you got Thurman Thomas, and then after Thurman Thomas, you had Barry Sanders. It would seem as if, everyone would flock to Oklahoma State to find running backs, but that's not the case. And we know Carson Palmer is different than Matt Leinart, who is different than John David Booty, who is different. So it goes on and on. It doesn't matter. If that was the case, everybody would flock to Mississippi Valley State to find Jerry Rice. So it doesn't matter where you go to school. Everybody's different. And as far as looking at these running backs, man, I really do believe a lot of guys tend to only focus on the splash plays, the highlights, which is why you see people propping up Goff, and they keep bringing up the game he had against Grambling. And yes, competition doesn't matter because you're out there with 11 able-bodied human beings playing football, but at the end of the day, what you're going to see from Grambling is not what you're going to see from UCLA, and that's just being honest. So things change when the competition rises, and as you move on to the next level, when you see the competition get even better, your weaknesses are enhanced. So you look at a guy like Trent Richardson, who had marginal vision at Alabama. Now at the pro level, where guys are going to get to that gap quicker, his marginal vision is enhanced. When you see a guy that had excellent footwork at Alabama and Mark Ingram, and what happens when he's at the pro level, when the skills are enhanced, his elite level, vision and footwork are going to be enhanced as well. So he's going to be able to make that backside cut that Trent Richardson couldn't make or wouldn't see it get stopped in the backfield. So people are looking at the game differently, and I think a lot of times people are looking for that splash play. But that's, to me, how I weed out who actually is in it for the long haul or who's in it for the time being, and then they go off and do something else. Because if you really love football and if you really are passionate about it, you'll be able to see these things and realize a lot of stuff people say don't matter, and it's just lazy journalism or lazy analysts or analysis. That just really weeds people out, because that to me is nonsense. Every back that went to Louisiana Lafayette is not Brian Mitchell, who was a quarterback when he was there. So I mean, but people, I don't know. I can't call it with these people nowadays.
Well, and I think that's why I have the affinity for Devontae Booker, because I don't know what he's going to be as a pro. I don't even know if he has pro ability, because a lot of his stuff comes from just out muscling people within inside the tackles. I don't know how that translates to the next level, but I just like to watch that guy run. Like every yard is earned. There's nothing, he's not making any cheap runs. He's not to go to a guy the Cardinals drafted this year, who I love. He's not getting David Johnson type lanes, at Northern Iowa, where he gets a inside handoff and he's going 20 yards down the field before he even has to make a move. So I enjoy watching guys like that run, and I think that's where I've been trying to improve as an evaluator, is getting away from these guys that maybe flash a little too much, and trying to find guys that produce on a consistent basis. Of course, that's going to get me to like guys like David Cobb, like last year, but we'll see what happens.
Well, I mean, he's in a bad situation, with they don't know which running back they want to start, and
yeah.
I would say this: the one guy that I can say I remember being better than the starter, and I was in high school when I saw this. It was Travis Minor, because he was from Louisiana, and they held him to be the next Warrick Dunn because he came from Baton Rouge, went to Florida State, but he was terrible. And the guy behind him, Jeff Chaney, was awesome. And every time Chaney got the ball, me and my homeboy was like, yo, this dude, number one, could play. And they kept giving the ball to Travis Minor because they wanted him to be the next Warrick Dunn. But when he wasn't good enough, but he kept getting the carries. That's the only time I remember someone as a backup being better than the starter, on limited carries.
When you look at other misconceptions or another misconception from this year, Emory, that you've seen about this draft class, what's one you have?
Well, Justin hinted on it about the lack of talent at the senior class. But there's a bunch of talented seniors. People are only focused on, the top 30 players or so. Same 15 players, everyone is writing multiple reports about, or everyone is overanalyzing. And I know I'm in a unique situation to where I'm at a lot of these small college games, but when you look at let's just say take the Ivy League for instance, there's a bunch of really good pro prospects at the Ivy League level along the line of scrimmage. I'm talking about the offensive line, I'm talking about the defensive line, and I'm also looking at, like, let's say the quarterback prospects, whether it be seniors and juniors. But I think, there's a bunch of good football players, and I've been to Boston College once this year. I go back up next week. I'll be at Boston College, North Carolina State. This weekend I'll be at tomorrow I'll be at East Carolina, UConn, and then Saturday I'll be at Stony Brook, Elon, and Temple, Notre Dame. So I'll get to see 3 games this weekend, and just from seeing Temple twice, this will be my 3rd time, I think. This will be my 4th time in the last 2 years of viewing Temple. So I got a pretty good grasp on Temple's, pro prospects, and Tyler Matakevich isn't one of them, and that's the one everybody's hyping up. But when you watch them, you see Matt Ioannidis, the defensive lineman. You'll see Hershey Walton, the other guy up front, defensive lineman, making plays. Kyle Friend, the center, I think is probably going to grade out as one of the top 2 or 3 centers in the country in my rankings. But just going around casting that net real wide, there's a lot of really good prospects out there in the nation that people are sleeping on because they are only focused on Hackenberg and a bunch of these junior prospects, and they're missing on a really good senior class.
You hit on it already, but give us those games that you're going to be at again and some prospects you'll be watching.
Well, East Carolina and UConn, this is interesting because, last year I had some good feed on Jeremy Davis, a good feed on Byron Jones, obviously, and their offensive lineman, Mateus, who ended up getting drafted by the CFL. So I'm going in fresh. I haven't seen UConn play at all. I've seen East Carolina play in passing last week versus Temple, but not really from a prospect breakdown standpoint. So this is a fresh game for me. As far as the Saturday games, Elon and Stony Brook. Elon doesn't really have anything I'm familiar with going in, but Stony Brook has a guy in Victor Ochi, the defensive end, who's probably going to transition to an outside edge rusher as a pro. He's outstanding. They have a lot of young, great defensive linemen that are going to play on Sundays. Their defense tackles are excellent. Last year when I saw them, they were sophomores, so now they're juniors. But Victor Ochi is the standout player who's probably going to end up either in the Shrine Game or the Senior Bowl. Stacy Bedell, the running back, is injured. He probably won't play for the rest of the season. He's nursing the shoulder. They say week to week, but he probably won't play. But he's a really good back. That's a junior. And as far as Temple, Notre Dame, I mean, you pick your poison with Notre Dame. There's a bunch of good talent. I'll be interested to see CJ Prosise, because the one thing I've noticed, all season long, every game I've been at, and I remember one weekend I was at Holy Cross, Albany, then saw Rhode Island Brown, and after that game I'm driving back home, and every game I'm leaving, whether it's from Temple or wherever, I'm always catching the Notre Dame game, and I'm always hearing CJ Prosise breaks a little long run, and I'm like, okay, is this dude really this good, or is this just the home broadcast hyping him up because that's what they have to do because it's the home broadcast? So I'll be excited to see how he really is as a running back. I'm familiar with Jalen Smith. Broke him down in the summer. Got his evaluation up already. But Temple, I know, and I'm interested to see how much P.J. Walker can maintain that level of consistency. Right off the bat, he plays a lot like Josh Johnson. And when he came out San Diego, and what do you see now from Josh Johnson? Let's say just when he was at San Francisco or when he was at the Bengals. But Temple's defensive line and offensive line are real excellent, and it's not a surprise because they're 4th and 5th year seniors up front. And that's the difference. When you got guys that are seniors playing college football, they're 22, 23 years old, they're going to be a lot better than what you see now from a lot of these these schools. Let's say like a TCU or Baylor, who may have one or two guys that are really good and everyone else is kind of mixed in. Continuity is key in college football.
Justin, for you, I know you're not going to have as many sleepers to talk about as Emory just did, but who are some sleepers that you'll be watching this weekend?
Well, this weekend I'm recording right now. I'm recording TCU and West Virginia. This is Thursday night that we're taping here. But the sleepers that one sleeper I really wanted to talk about that I'll be watching this weekend is Miami versus Duke game, and Duke center. His name is Matt Skura, and I got a chance to watch him earlier this season, and he was really had a terrific game. That was against Georgia Tech, and he was playing across from a defensive lineman that they have, and I'm hoping I pronounced this right, but Adam Gotsis, who is an Aussie rules football player, turned American football player now for them, and he's a big 6'5", 290, five technique build type of guy, who is billed as a very high-end athlete, and really Skura pushed him and the rest of that Georgia Tech line around throughout the game. So I'm very interested to see him again and just to see how Miami responds after getting just getting shellacked and getting their coach fired last weekend. So, but this isn't a guy that necessarily I'm going to be able to watch this weekend, but I know he's playing this weekend. But I wanted to hit on him while Emory's on the show because this is a raging Cajun and a guy that I did watch last week, and that's running back Elijah McGuire from Louisiana Lafayette. And last week against I'm drawing a blank, but last week they were playing Arkansas State, and McGuire was facing 9 guys in the box. I mean, it's a complete disrespect for the passing game. They shut him down in the running game, but he was still able to get over 100 yards receiving that day, and it just speaks to what kind of player McGuire is. Even if you can stop him in one aspect, he's just not somebody who can be completely shut down, and he ended up having a very good game, even if the box score doesn't show that he had a great day running the ball. So McGuire's a player I really like. He's a junior. As we talk about not, focusing on seniors, I'm going to focus on a junior here, but I wanted to get Emory's take on a fellow raging Cajun.
Yeah, McGuire is. I remember, and this is fun. This is the end game that goes on when you still have a connection to the not only to the university but to the football team. One of the coaches who's a pro liaison that's on the staff now was a guy that coached me when I was in college. So we're dating back 15 years. He's a lifer. He played at UL too. So I remember I went down for the New Orleans Bowl, and he was like, man, how come you keep calling for McGuire to start? He said, I watched your preview video. So you keep calling for McGuire to start. And this time he was a freshman. And so he pulled me to the side, like off to the, by the goalpost or what have you. He was like, I agree with you. He should be playing more, but, try not to be so, I was like, hey, coach, I only know one way. I was a locker room lawyer anyway. So, but he was like, this guy is going to be great. He was also the one that tipped me on, the Hamilton and the Ringo coming up for last year. But McGuire, game breaker, and the one catch he had in that game, the touchdown reception, that was a contested catch that you see a lot of receivers don't make.
It was an awesome play.
Awesome play. You don't see Jamal Robinson making that play, who's a big receiver on, that a lot of people want to talk about as a prospect who's hurt now. But McGuire, when you're a running back that has that ability to go the distance on any given play, that's the guy I want in my backfield, and the fact that he can make people miss within a confined space, a la Amir Abdullah, that's a guy that can, make you miss without touching him, or break a tackle without you touching him. And so I'm really excited about how he's going to progress. And it's a shame that he's playing with – it's funny because their quarterback that should have taken over for Broadway is now starting at Southeastern Louisiana because he didn't want to sit behind Broadway, and so now they're stuck with who they have now, and that's the issue. Because again, when you run that zone read offense, you saw it. I tweeted about it when I was at the Saints Eagles game. The Saints biting on the Bradford fake, like, yo, he's not going to run. Like, what are you doing? There's no reason to follow that fake, So, it's tough because now guys are crowding the box. They can't beat anyone one-on-one. Their other good receiver, who's a really good prospect, I believe, is Riles, who's a former linebacker. Came in as a linebacker, moved to receiver, and he has the best hands on the team. But McGuire is going to be awesome, and it's good that he's going through this quote-unquote, these trials now, because he's going to have to create a lot more, and that ultimately helps out your game. But he's going to be good, and the fact that he can be a receiver, he can also return kicks and punts, which adds to your value as a prospect going forward, coming from a Louisiana Lafayette.
Yeah, and this is a kid who was Sunbelt Conference Player of the Year as a true sophomore, so he's a special player at that level.
Yeah, and I failed to mention one guy that we talk about sleepers, and I get to see him next week, and I'm excited to see him. And I have to get this out here now because what's going to happen is I'm going to put out a video, I'm going to put out a small school spotlight, and people are going to act like they didn't see it, and then all of a sudden a major network is going to get a hold of it, and all of a sudden, oh, wow, you saw it last year with James O'Shaughnessy, right? And so this guy, Dalen Williams, the quarterback from Dartmouth, I mean, I became a huge fan of his last year because he could. And Ivy League they're so unique in what they do and how they do things. They have their own awards, and I was at the Bushnell Cup last year where they give out the Ivy League Player of the Year, Offensive and Defensive Player of the Year, and also the overall Ivy League Player of the Year, and he was a finalist. And I remember seeing a couple of Dartmouth games, and every pass was he didn't make mistakes with the football. And you're facing defenses like Harvard, who's a top 5 FCS defense, Princeton, who's always good defensively, and they have a really good offensive scheme. And their coach Bob Sarace is a really good. He's a fun guy to be around. I've interviewed him, and seeing how he runs his offense. You're going to see a little bit of everything when you watch Princeton play. You're going to see some single wing, some options, some spread, everything from Princeton. So they make the games fun. But Dalen Williams, the quarterback, did a great job, all season long. And Dartmouth is not notoriously known for being consistently good in the Ivy League. And this year, I think he has like 13 touchdowns, 1 interception. And his accuracy is off the charts. His percentages are high. He's at like maybe 69 to 70% passing the football. And he's about, standing next to him last year, he's about 6 feet tall. I give him a good 6 feet tall. I'm 5'10", 5'9.5" if you want to, really be accurate. But he's about 6 feet tall, maybe about 200 pounds around that area. But he plays a lot like Jeff Blake, a guy that has tremendous deep ball, good throwing on the run, can play from the pocket, and doesn't make mistakes. And I think when you watch him play, I'll get to see him next. I want to see him this week versus tomorrow versus Harvard, but I got, scheduled to go to UConn instead. But next week I'll get to see him versus I forgot who they play, but I'll be up at Dartmouth, and he'll do fine. And I'm interested to see how hard he can throw a football, and get to see the full scope of his game live and what he can do. Let's say from a mobility standpoint, from a situational standpoint, because it's a little bit different when you're watching film. Now I have a lot of film study on him in the summer, but this is my first chance to see him live. But he's a really good quarterback.
We'll move on in the show as we always do with our hot take segment, and of course, last week was full of takes and wonderful takes they were. We appreciate you, Internet, for all that you do for us in this segment. I'll start out this week with one of our co-hosts, Justis Mosqueda, and Justis is our guy. But in in a class that's, quote unquote down, as we've already discussed that myth, he's asking the question about Reggie Ragland, the linebacker from Alabama. If there's one thing that we've learned about Alabama defensive players, it's that you're going to consistently underrate them, and then they're going to get drafted higher than you expect. But Justis's take was, is Reggie Ragland first round good? I'm not totally convinced on him as that type of prospect. That's interesting because, I mean, when you're talking about the NFL right now, there's a dearth of inside linebacker talent in the 3-4 and just off-ball linebackers in general that are really, quote unquote two-way players that can play in the run and against the pass, and I feel like Ragland's done a lot of that this year, and he's been very talented in that way. Maybe I'm off. Definitely wouldn't be the first time in my evaluation, but I don't know. I feel like Ragland is up there along with a lot of other talented linebackers that have come out of Alabama.
Yeah, Ragland is a senior now, and one thing that we like to see out of seniors is as improvement from year to year, and I think you've definitely seen that. He's kind of taken a jump from where he was last year to this year, and taking on some of that same type of those same type of responsibilities that we saw from Dante Hightower when he was at Bama, and even the advanced stats guys. There's some really good advanced stats out there that are useful, and we're seeing that he scores very well in those categories, and it shows up when stats like that match what you see on Saturdays. That's when you can really use that information. So I'm with you. I don't know about first round yet because I probably don't make that determination till March or so, but he's been really, really good for them.
Yeah, I tend to feel the same way. Every time you watch Alabama, and again, I haven't really dove into guys from a critique standpoint. So what I'm about to say is mostly from just in passing. He always pops up. Even though personally, I think Reuben Foster is a better inside backer, but if I'm going to trust any defensive players coming from Alabama, it's going to be within the front seven. I won't trust any secondary players being coached by Nick Saban. How he coaches guys to not find the football. So those guys will always struggle as a pro. But their front seven guys, outside of maybe Nico Johnson, have been productive. Guys that have gotten drafted. So I would say it just like everyone thought C.J. Mosley was an average player when that wasn't the case. He played well on both ends of defense. And Ragland, while I haven't seen him in passing, I have to go back and study. But in passing, how well he does in coverage, I do know versus the run, he plays like you want an inside backer to play. He looks to hit, and that's all I can ask for, someone that's aggressive versus the run.
Justin, what about you?
The hottest take I saw this week, and I'm going to skip Andy Benoit from. I'm just going to mention this in passing, but I'm going to skip Andy Benoit mentioning that Jared Goff is going to be an irrefutable star, and he used the word irrefutable at the NFL level because we've talked about Goff so much. I just wanted to get that out there, but I'm not going to dwell on it. Instead, I'm going to talk about a fantasy football Twitter follow that I have, tweeting this out this morning, and the tweet read, Cook, meaning Dalvin Cook of Florida State, greater than sign, Fournette, meaning Leonard Fournette, greater than sign, Henry, greater than sign, Booker, meaning, again, Devontae Booker, and then greater than sign times 4, Ezekiel Elliott. And I sent this take to Emory this morning because this is not me being a homer. You guys know that I evaluate Ohio State players fairly.
No, you're a homer, but you're accurate in a lot of your homerism.
But Ezekiel Elliott's the best draft-eligible running back in this class. He's certainly the most complete draft-eligible running back in this class. He runs with power, with speed. He can run inside, outside. He can cut. He's agile. He's strong, fast. He's an excellent receiver, and he's a tremendous pass blocker and even lead blocker as a fullback. And I could understand if you like those sophomores, Cook and Fournette, better because maybe you've seen the flash from those games. But Ezekiel Elliott, for 2 years now and going, he's been one of the best backs in college football. And just because he plays with a lot of other talented players, I can't imagine why you would have those 4 backs plus 4 greater than signs over Ezekiel Elliott.
Yeah, I mean, I don't get that. That's hilarious to me because if there's any position I will watch before anybody else, it'll be the running back position. And Ezekiel Elliott, I'm sorry, is a guy that, yeah, and I would say right now, Ian Kenyon of Bleach Report, who has his fair share of hot takes, but he came up with the best comparison for Elliott, I think by far, and that was Deuce McAllister. There's just an elite level of smoothness to Elliott's game. There's no wasted movements. He runs with power. He runs with great acceleration. He has excellent vision, and he's a guy that you could trust lining up in the slot and be a good 3 to 7 receptions a game type of a guy from the receiver position. So he's a tremendous football player. That is by far the hottest take I've seen this week.
Yeah, Emory, do you have any that you've seen that you would like to mention?
You know what? Andy Benoit. Benoit. Yeah, I'm from Louisiana, so it's Benoit. But Benoit. I can't. It's not one particular tweet. It's a collection of tweets where it's just like they tell you nothing. And listen, I don't care if you're a fantasy football guy, if you're an analytics guy, if you're a draft guy, if you're X's and O's guy. If you're gonna tweet pertaining to what you portray yourself to be, tell me something. Give me some information. Let's say Matt Harmon, reception perception. At least he gives you something to where you looking. Okay, let me see what he's talking about, how he came about his formula, and why he came to that conclusion. I'm learning something. But if you're Andy Benoit and you're just tweeting out film, Bengals, quarterback completes pass, great concept. Like, what the hell are you talking about? What concept? It makes
passing concept.
Right, passing concept. Great way to manipulate defense. In what way? Like, let me know something. But when you have a catalog of tweets that do that, it's like, yo, do you actually know what the hell you're looking at? Are you just saying shit? I'm sorry. Are you just saying things that you think people want to hear? Because that's where I get frustrated. Because it's like, yo, just be honest. That's like me tweeting baseball. I have an idea of how baseball works, but if I'm trying to get technical, I'm going to sound like Andy Benoit. I'm going to stay in my lane. I'm going to get to my destination faster. Whether I'm driving or I'm a passenger, I'm going to do what I know I can be better at. And so when you're saying, especially to me it sounds bad, but maybe to the layman, person, it probably doesn't sound, it sounds like he's dropping knowledge. But to the person that knows, it's like, yo, what do you, and that's why you see guys like LaCharles Bentley or Duke Manyweather get frustrated when people talk offensive line. If they don't necessarily know what they're saying. Now, granted, they may be a little bit over the top, but from their perspective, they played the position, so they have an affinity for it, and they know exactly what to look for. Probably how I would be when people talk running backs. So I get why they go, aggressively at those guys. So to talk to those people that to say things like Benoit is saying to those that know, it comes across as like, yo, are you joking with us right now? Are you serious, or are you really believing that you're dropping some truth right here? Like, quarterback completes pass. This is a great concept. like E.J. Manuel has the worst performance of any quarterback so far this season, as if Colin Kaepernick didn't throw 4 interceptions against the Cardinals, as if
the Houston Texans don't exist, right?
Exactly. Man, be real. So he gets my hot take of the month award. I don't know if it's for the date that we're doing, but I mean, just if I'm not a guest on this anymore, you have enough of Benoit takes to disperse amongst.
Oh, you'll definitely be invited back. Well, that is a perfect rant to end on tonight. So, Emory, we appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule. Go ahead and plug Football Game Plan and tell us, what you guys do and where we can find your content.
They can find us on our website at footballgameplan.com. I'm on Twitter at FBallGamePlan, and to get the copies of those 2 outstanding newly released books, Football: A Love Story and What Did Football Teach Me? We have over 100 interviews of current and former player, coaches, executives, entertainers talking about their love for the game, what the game taught them, and why they stay involved in the game of football. Visit our website at footballgameplan.com/books.
And I want to also add on, Emory's got an awesome podcast on his own that he does weekly called Direct Snap, and that's available on SoundCloud, as are the Draft Breakdown podcast and our entire catalog of podcasts, and also the Draft Breakdown Family podcast is now available on iTunes. So subscribe to us, listen to Direct Snap on SoundCloud, and check out Emory's stuff. He's doing all these live game scouting trips, which virtually nobody else does. Let's be honest. And he's putting together and he's putting together game notes that are available on the webpage. Great resource there. Thanks, Emory, for being on the show, and we'll have you back again soon.
Yeah, and I can attest to what Emory does, because as soon as the Cardinals drafted Rodney Gunter in the 4th round, the first person I contacted was Emory Hunt, because that's how any small school guy, I mean, Emory's great at every level, but any small school guy you need a note on, Emory has it. And he sent me a note back that said, look at this link to this game notes that I posted, and he was right on point. And so, Emory's there at games that we'll never dream of being at, and he's taking notes and making them available to all of you, the fans. So, not only follow this guy, but learn from this guy, because, as he just said, there's a lot of riffraff out there. Sort through it and follow a good guy like Emory Hunt at F-Ball Game Plan on Twitter. So thanks for joining us, Emory, and you'll definitely be back soon.
Appreciate that, guys, and I'm still learning myself. So as I learn, I'll share with you guys as well.
All right. Thanks for listening, everybody. We'll be back next week, and we look forward to talking to you guys again soon. Thank you.